the type to beat up the bad guy when things turn ugly.
My name is Waffles, and I'm a government whistleblower turned political commentator, and this is the last 24 hours in the news. Today is August 30th, 2025. It is 10:31 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Here are the top U.S. news highlights for the past 24 hours. Appeals court rules most of Trump's tariffs unlawful. A U.S. federal appeals court ruled that a broad swath of President Trump's reciprocal tariffs exceeded statutory authority and are illegal. Though the tariffs were temporarily left in place through October 14th while the administration considers an appeal, this is a major check on the administration's economic authority and will likely go up to the Supreme Court. Federal judge blocks expansion if expedited fast-track deportations. U.S. District Judge Gia M. Cobb issued an order now blocking the administration's move to apply expedited removal more wisely inside the country, finding the expansion likely violates due process protections. The decision is the immediate legal barrier to the administration's plan to scale deportations. It will be appealed. Local pushback executive orders to limit federal enforcement operations. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson signed an executive order aimed at resisting a planned federal immigration enforcement operation and any possible National Guard federal troop deployment to the city. The order directs local agencies to limit cooperation and requires federal officers operating in the city to identify themselves and follow local rules, e.g., no masks. The move follows federal signals of upcoming enforcement activity and public comments by the president about deploying forces. Heightened risk of federal enforcement presence in U.S. cities. Local resistance reported over the last 24 hours, reporting focused on Chicago, where city leadership is publicly preparing legal and operational resistance to a federal enforcement operation that could include federal law enforcement agents and potentially guard support. Officials expressed concern about unmarked federal officers and possible raid deployments. The mayor framed the order as protecting residents' civil rights. This is an active, escalating city-federal confrontation with potential for local mobilization. In the same reporting window, the president's public posts and White House rhetoric have reiterated threats to come to cities that the administration frames as failing on crime, language that local officials say has escalated tensions and prompted preemptive legal and operational measures. In the last 24 hours, the most acute civil risk story is city-level mobilization resistance in Chicago, tied to a planned federal immigration enforcement operation and rhetoric about using federal forces. And with that being said, Gavin Newsom is currently out pumping out a bunch of information in regards to the murder and crime rates and how the places that Donald Trump is targeting are not the places with the highest crime rates in the nation, and that if he is going to deploy National Guard, he should probably consider deploying them to places where there's actually issues with crime. Court decisions constraining administration policy tools. The appeals court tariff ruling and the injunction on deportation expansion are both immediate, legally enforceable limits that curb two central policy priorities of the administration: trade and immigration. Each decision carries downstream risk or benefit trade-offs for citizens, economic effects from tariff disruption, community civil liberties impacts from immigration enforcement. Legal and state policy countermeasures are active. Mayors and governors, Chicago and Illinois, publicly are using executive orders and legal avenues to protect local policing authority and residents' civil liberties, a pattern that creates legal fights with federal directives and could disrupt local services or coordination. Public safety, e.g. sheltering, etc., if escalations continue. Consumer and Infrastructure Watch, large Verizon nationwide wireless outage today. That's suspicious. They're a competitor of Elon Musk. who is currently with T-Mobile, and Elon Musk happens to hate T-Mobile, so I just find it ironic that Verizon seems to be having some major technical issues right now. Major Verizon customers across many U.S. metro areas experienced a wide outage due to a reported software issue, not a cabling issue, not an access to service issue, a software issue. The outage affected voice data access, reports of phones showing SOS mode. Created public safety concerns about connectivity for people relying on phones for emergency contact, and has been mostly restored as engineers worked through the evening. This is an example of a privately operated infrastructure failure with immediate consumer and safety impacts. Local utility outages and routine incidents. There were localized power outage reports, but no single large sustained national power grid failure reported in the last 24 hours. Public health update. No new nationally declared public health emergency in the last 24 hours. In the 24-hour window, there were not any newly declared national public health emergencies. There are ongoing foodborne illness investigations. CDC reported a multi-state salmonella outbreak tied to eggs. Published August 28th. Still active, but the initial CDC FDA bulletin was published a few days ago. And that's what I have for that right now. U.S. visa revocations for Palestinian officials ahead of UNGA international pushback. The State Department rescinded visas for Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas and roughly 80 officials prior to the UN General Assembly. Palestinian and European leaders are urging reconsideration. This diplomatic move has immediate implications for U.S. standing at the UN and could heighten tensions ahead of international meetings. U.S. senators call for surge of humanitarian aid to Gaza. Several U.S. senators urged the administration to speed humanitarian aid, e.g. baby formula, to Gaza amid worsening famine reports. This is a prominent congressional pressure item on U.S. foreign policy in the last 24 hours. SCO summit trade tensions context. The appeals court tariff ruling ties into a wider diplomatic backdrop. U.S. trade policy, tariffs, and the administration's hardline pressure to remain major talking points at international summits, SCO, regional partners, which could reduce short-term diplomatic frictions or retaliatory measures. Ongoing legal actions against the Trump administration. Tariff litigation, major recent win versus the administration. The Federal Circuit's court decision that most of the Trump administration's tariffs are illegal is the biggest judicial development affecting Trump's domestic policy toolkit. In the last 24 hours, the administration can appeal to the Supreme Court. Judge Jaya Cobb's order today on immigration enforcement expansions blocks the fast-track deportation expansion, a major judicial check that directly halts an administration program in the near term. Here are the U.S. trade and economic highlights from the past 24 hours. U.S.-Japan trade talks hit a snag. A Nikkei report reveals that trade negotiations between U.S. and Japan stalled after the Trump administration demanded that Japan increase its rice purchases, a condition that Japanese officials strongly rejected as interference in domestic affairs. The demand conflicts with a July agreement under which Japan had already agreed to increase U.S. rice imports by 75%. The condition prompted the cancellation of a planned visit by Japan's trade negotiator, Rosie Akazawa. Japan is also awaiting an amended executive order from the U.S. to clarify overlapping tariffs before moving forward with a broader $550 billion investment package. This twist introduces fresh uncertainty into U.S.-Japan trade relations and delays progress on a significant bilateral economic deal. U.S. launches investigation into solar imports from India, Laos, and Indonesia. What happened? The U.S. International Trade Commission, ITC, has unanimously voted to move forward with an investigation into whether solar imports from India, Laos, and Indonesia are harming domestic solar manufacturing. The probe follows a petition from U.S.-based solar manufacturers claiming that Chinese-owned companies are exploiting subsidies and undercutting U.S. producers. Solar imports from these countries soared to $289 million in 2022 to $1.6 billion in 2023. Preliminary findings are countervailing duties are expected by October 10th, with anti-dumping findings by December 24th. Why it matters: this action reflects protectionist pressure on renewable energy sector and could lead to new tariffs affecting global supply chains. Strong U.S. consumer spending, widening trade deficit. What happened in July? U.S. consumer spending rose by 0.5%, the strongest monthly gain in 4 months, propelled by robust purchase in motor vehicles, clothing, and services. Goods spending advanced 0.8%, services by 0.4%, core personal consumption expenditures, PCE, the Fed's key inflation gauge, rose 0.3% month over month and 2.9% year over year, its highest since February. Meanwhile, imports surged, widening the goods trade deficit 22.1% to $103.6 billion, a drag on trade and GDP. Strong consumer demand is fueling economic resilience, but rising import fueled deficits and elevated inflation may constrain Federal Reserve policymakers. And remember, kids, the stock market is not the economy. Just because the S&P 500 or Dow Jones may be performing does not mean that wages are growing, jobs are secure, inflation is under control, or that people are thriving. Global indicators and Fed policy signal. China's factory activity, official PMI for August, rose to 49.4% from 49.3 in July, but remains below the expansion threshold, marking a fifth straight month of contraction. U.S.-China trade relations remain tense, though Chinese Trade Representative Li Chang'an has been in the U.S., urging economic cooperation. U.S. market dynamics. Wall Street is near record highs as markets anticipate a Fed rate cut, with the upcoming PCE and trade data closely watched. Fed Governor Lisa Cook has filed suit against Trump's attempts to remove her, citing threats to the Fed's independence. The U.S. also ended a tariff exemption for low-value imports under $800, which could affect small-scale global e-commerce. These developments reflect a global economy under pressure from manufacturing slowdowns, U.S. inflation, and central bank uncertainty. And here are the upcoming hazardous weather outlook for the next 3 days. Northeast, scattered thunderstorms are expected, especially in New England and upstate New York. Some storms could bring heavy rainfall and localized flooding in low-lying and urban areas. Winds may gust up to 40 miles per hour in stronger cells. Hazards are highest during afternoon and evening hours. Mid-Atlantic hot, humid conditions will persist, with heat indices topping the mid to upper 90s in parts of Virginia, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. A few strong thunderstorms may develop along the I-95 corridor. Isolated flash flooding is possible where heavy downpours occur. Southeast, a stalled boundary is expected to fuel widespread showers and storms across the Gulf Coast states. Heavy rain could cause localized flooding in parts of Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. Daily storm coverage remains high, with the strongest storms bringing frequent lightning and dangerous downpours. Midwest, a frontal system is sweeping across the nation, bringing clusters of strong to severe thunderstorms. Risks include damaging winds, large hail, and locally heavy rainfall. From the Great Lakes through the Ohio Valley, conditions remain unsettled through midweek. Great Plains, northern and central plains will see a risk of severe weather, including hail and wind gusts topping 60 miles per hour. Thunderstorm clusters could organize into larger complexes at night. The southern plains stay mostly hot and dry, but with isolated storms possible in Texas and Oklahoma. Monsoonal moisture in the Rockies and Intermountain West continues to bring scattered thunderstorms, especially over higher terrain in Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico. Localized flash flooding is the primary concern, particularly near burn scars and slot canyons. Southwest and desert areas, hot and dry conditions remain dormant. Heat advisories are in place for parts of Arizona and Nevada and inland California, with triple-digit highs pushing health risks. Some isolated storms are possible in Arizona and New Mexico due to monsoon flow. West Coast, Northern California, and Pacific Northwest remain mostly dry. Breezy conditions increase fire weather concerns in parts of Oregon and Washington. Farther south, coastal California stays mild with low marine layer clouds, while interior valleys heat up. Alaska and Hawaii. In Alaska, showers and cooler conditions are expected in the southeast, while interior areas stay relatively dry. In Hawaii, passing showers continue on windward slopes, with breezy trade winds persisting. And here are the top international news highlights for the past 24 hours. Rugby World Cup 2025. England dominates Samoa. England delivered a commanding performance against Samoa, winning 92-3 in the Women's Rugby World Cup quarterfinals. Jess Breach scored 3 of England's 14 tries, showcasing their offensive prowess. Despite the heavy defeat, Samoa celebrated scoring their first points in the tournament. China hosts international journalists in Tianjin. In Tianjin, China, a group of Chinese and foreign journalists participated in city visiting events, including a tour of Luban Workshop Experience Museum. The museum, part of Tianjin Light Industry Vocational Technical College, offers insights into industrial robot training equipment, reflecting China's advancements in vocational education and technology. Moroccan alumni share success stories in Casablanca. Over 50 Moroccan alumni of U.S. universities gathered at Dar America, the cultural center of the U.S. Consulate General in Casablanca, to share their success stories. The event heightened the positive impact of U.S. education on Morocco's development and fostered stronger bilateral ties. Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein premieres at Venice Film Festival. Ooh, that sounds fun. Oscar Isaac and Jacob Elordi attended the world premiere of Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein at the Venice Film Festival. The film, eagerly anticipated for its unique take on the classic tale, has generated significant buzz among critics and audiences alike. BWF World Championships 2025 highlights from Paris. The BWF World Championships in Paris showcased intense badminton matches with notable performances from players like Zhang Zhenbang and Wei Yaxin of China. Their semifinal victory in the mixed doubles event demonstrated China's continued dominance in the sport. Russian drone strike in Ukraine. A Russian drone strike in southern Ukraine resulted in 1 fatality, escalating tensions in the region. Israeli aid to northern Gaza. Israel announced plans to slow aid to northern Gaza, citing security concerns, which may impact humanitarian efforts. Chinese president's upcoming visit. Chinese President Xi Jinping is scheduled to visit several countries, aiming to strengthen diplomatic relations and economic partnerships. Chinese President Xi Jinping is actively pursuing a series of diplomatic initiatives aimed at strengthening China's international relations and economic partnerships. China-India relations, a step towards reconciliation. President Xi Jinping hosted Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Tianjin for bilateral talks, marking Modi's first visit to China in 7 years. The discussion focused on enhancing cooperation in trade, investment, and regional connectivity. Both leaders emphasized the importance of stabilizing the border situation and addressing mutual concerns, including terrorism. This meeting signifies a cautious warming of Sino-Indian ties following previous tensions. China-Russia relations, strengthening strategic ties. President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin are set to meet during the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit (SCO) in Tianjin. The summit aims to bolster regional cooperation and challenge U.S. strategies on global trade and conflict. The leaders are expected to discuss various bilateral issues, including the ongoing situation in Ukraine. China, Central Asia, building a shared future at the invitation of oh boy, I'm going to butcher it. It's Kazakh, 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 President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, President Xi Jinping. Okay, at the invitation of Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, President Xi Jinping attended the second China Central Asia Summit in Astana from June 16th to 18th. The summit focused on building a closer China Central Asia community with a shared future, aiming to enhance cooperation in various sectors. China, Europe, expanding diplomatic horizons. In May 2025, President Xi Jinping visited 3 European countries, France, Serbia, and Hungary. These visits aim to signal China's increased influence in Europe and strengthen economic and geopolitical ties with these nations. China, Egypt, strengthening Middle Eastern ties. President Xi Jinping is scheduled to visit Cairo as part of China's strategy to protect its interests in the Middle East, particularly concerning trade flows and maritime transport through the Suez Canal. This visit underscores China's commitment to enhancing its diplomatic and economic relations in the region. For more accurate and up-to-date information, don't forget to check in tomorrow. My name is Waffles, and this has been the last 24 hours in the news. Today is August 30th, 2025, and it is now 11:09 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I better get this online.
So the Olympics is great, and Johnny for the others, the World Cup. Johnny is the head of it. We had our top people, Wasserman. They all came in on the Olympics, and then I saw Johnny. And we got the World Cup, too. And, it's only because they rigged the election that I'll be your president representing you there. I got both of them. I got the Olympics, and I got the World Cup. And I said, it's too bad. One was in 2026, and the other was in 2028. And I said, I won't be there. I won't be your president. But then they rigged the election. And now we won, so I'm going to be your president for the Olympics and for the World Cup. So, Johnny, thank you for the World Cup. And everybody, thank you for the Olympics. We're going to have a great time.
Hey guys, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment on my videos. And also, don't forget to check out my shop where you could get this awesome Real Patriots Punch Nazis t-shirt. America, fuck yeah. And if you go to the link tree in my bio on most platforms, it's got links to everything, all of my stuff. You can find my shop there. I'm on eBay. You can also get this cool Exterminate MAGA sticker, cause MAGA's fucking cockroaches. And fuck MAGA, abolish MAGA, fuck you MAGA.